standing in the dimly lit corner of the grand ballroom. My eyes remained glued to the couple moving in perfect harmony across the dance floor. Clara, my wife of what once felt like 10 blissful years, was entwined in the arms of Ethan Blackwood, her charming and overconfident boss from the marketing firm. Her shimmering emerald gown caught the glow of the grand chandeliers as his hand rested possessively at the small of her back. Their movements were seamless, their bodies synchronized, their eyes locked in a way that sent a nauseating twist through my stomach. Around them, Clara's co-workers and high-profile clients watched the scene unfold with sly smiles and barely concealed whispers. Fragments of their murmurs reached me, speculations about the undeniable chemistry between Clara and Ethan, hints that I should be worried. Worried? No, I was far beyond that. I was consumed with humiliation and barely contained rage. For the third consecutive year, Clara had insisted we attend her company's over-the-top charity gala. And for the third year running, she had deserted me entirely to spend the night locked in Ethan's orbit. My fists tightened as I fought the overwhelming urge to storm onto the dance floor, yank her out of his grip, and end their little spectacle. But I resisted. Causing a scene would only serve as more ammunition for the gossips. Instead, I lingered deeper in the shadows, trying to steady my thoughts and plan my next move. My heart clenched as I saw Ethan lean closer to Clara, whispering something in her ear that made her smile glow with a warmth I hadn't seen in years. My mind, desperate for reprieve, drifted back to a time when that smile was meant only for me, back when we were newlyweds, inseparable, and utterly in love. Those were days when people envied the bond we shared, a partnership so solid it seemed unbreakable. But over the past year, that bond had weakened. Late nights at the office, unexplained absences, and an undeniable chill in her demeanor had taken their toll. I had told myself it was just the strain of her skyrocketing career. But as I watched her now, gazing at him with a softness I hadn't seen in years, I realized how blind I'd been. When the music finally ended and the dancers drifted apart, Clara, flushed and radiant, moved toward the bar with Ethan shadowing her every step. I trailed behind them, keeping a safe distance while straining to catch snippets of their conversation above the din of the crowd. "You were incredible out there," Ethan murmured, his hand brushing her lower back in a way that made my blood boil. "Every man in this room is envious of me tonight." Clara laughed, a sound that once had the power to make my heart skip a beat. "Oh, Ethan, you flatter me. But don't forget, I'm still a married woman." "For now," he replied with a sly grin that made my stomach churn. "But we both know that's just a temporary hurdle." I froze, the words hitting me like a freight train. Was I hearing this right? Were they openly conspiring to destroy my marriage? The room spun as the full weight of their betrayal sank in. Stumbling backward, I collided with a passing waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses. The sound of shattering glass drew gasps from the crowd, and heads turned in my direction. Clara spun around, her eyes locking with mine. For a split second, her expression revealed guilt, raw and undeniable. But almost as quickly, her face hardened, her features setting into a mask of cool detachment. "Jacob, are you all right?" she asked, her tone dripping with feigned concern. "You look unwell. Maybe we should leave early." I opened my mouth to reply, but no words came. Her hypocrisy, her audacity, her callous disregard for everything we had built together, it was too much to process. Shaking my head, I turned and pushed through the crowd, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom. The cool night air hit me like a slap to the face as I stumbled onto the sidewalk. I inhaled deeply, my lungs greedily pulling in the fresh air as I tried to clear my head. How could she do this? To me? To us? And what about Sophie, our sweet 8-year-old daughter, who idolized her mother? Had Clara even considered the havoc this would wreak on her life? Devastation. The word echoed in my head like a cruel taunt. No, I wouldn't allow them to ruin me, to dismantle everything I had poured my life into. If Clara was determined to throw it all away, she wouldn't get the upper hand. I'll make sure of it. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number of an old friend from law school, someone who had since made a name for himself as a ruthless divorce attorney. "Daniel, it's Jacob," I said when he picked up. My voice was raw but resolute. "Sounds strange even to me," I admitted, my voice barely steady. "I need your help. My wife, she's having an affair with her boss. I want to file for divorce." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by Daniel letting out a low whistle. "Jacob, man, I'm sorry. That's rough. Really rough. Listen, come by my office first thing Monday morning. We'll get everything in motion. I'll make sure you and Sophie are protected." "Thanks, Daniel," I said, the words heavy with both gratitude and relief. For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of control return. I knew I could count on him. Ending the call, I stood still for a moment, staring back at the glowing windows of the hotel. Inside, Clara was likely looking for me, ready to weave another web of lies. But I was done playing the clueless fool. As I walked to my car, a plan began to crystallize in my mind. I'd act the part of the devoted husband for a little while longer, gathering every shred of evidence I needed. When the time came, I would strike hard and fast. Clara wouldn't see it coming. She'd be served with divorce papers and face a custody battle she couldn't win. Ethan Blackwood might have stolen my wife, but he wouldn't take my daughter or my self-respect. No, I would make sure both of them paid dearly for their betrayal. When the dust finally settled, I'd be the one standing tall, ready to rebuild my life into something stronger, something unbreakable. Sliding into the driver's seat, I started the car and pulled onto the quiet street. My heart pounded as adrenaline coursed through me. The war had begun, and I wouldn't rest until I claimed victory. The drive home blurred by as my mind swirled with images of Clara and Ethan together. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, and my palms grew slick with sweat. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my thoughts had spiraled into a storm of anger and betrayal. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. The beautiful colonial, with its perfectly manicured lawn and warm porch lights, had once symbolized everything Clara and I had built together. It was a beacon of shared success, our version of the American dream. Now it felt hollow, an empty facade hiding the wreckage of lies and deceit. Drawing a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked up the front path. Reaching for the doorknob, I froze, a wave of dread rolling over me. What if Clara was already home, waiting to confront me about my abrupt departure from the gala? Would I be able to face her lies head-on and pretend everything was fine while my world was falling apart? Steeling myself, I turned the knob and pushed open the door. The house was quiet, save for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room. Flicking on the lights, I scanned the space. Clara was nowhere to be seen. Her coat and purse were missing from the usual spot near the door, and her keys were gone from the dish on the console table. A quick glance into the garage confirmed what I already suspected. Her car wasn't there. Relief swept over me, only to be replaced by a sharp pang of anger. Of course she wasn't home. She was probably out with Ethan, celebrating their victory over the husband they thought was too blind to notice. Dragging myself upstairs, I entered our bedroom, each step weighted with exhaustion and bitterness. The room looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. The bed neatly made, Clara's vanity still cluttered with her expensive perfumes and cosmetics. Yet now, everything seemed tainted, stained by her betrayal. I sank onto the edge of the bed, burying my face in my hands. How had it come to this? What had I done, or failed to do, that pushed her into Ethan's arms? I replayed the years of our marriage in my mind, searching for answers. I could only see a blur of happy memories. Our wedding day, the first time we held Sophie, lazy mornings spent wrapped in each other's arms. Had all of it been a lie? Or had Clara simply grown bored with our life together? Bored of me? The thought twisted my gut, stirring a bitter cocktail of sorrow and rage. I don't know how long I sat there, drowning in my thoughts. But eventually, the sound of the front door opening and closing jolted me back to the present. Clara's familiar footsteps echoed through the house as her heels clicked against the hardwood floor. My pulse quickened. This was it, the moment I would confront her, demand the truth. Rising to my feet, I moved downstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Clara stood in the kitchen, her back to me as she rummaged through the fridge. For a moment, I just watched her, anger simmering just beneath the surface. Then I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what was about to come. Clara was still in her gown from the gala, the emerald silk clinging to her curves in a way that made my throat tighten with a mix of anger and lingering pain. "You're home late," I said, my voice sounding foreign, even to me. She jumped, spinning around to face me. For a fleeting moment, guilt flickered in her wide eyes, her mouth slightly agape. But almost immediately, her expression shifted into a practiced, composed smile. "Jacob, you startled me," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I was just getting a drink. It was such a long night, and I'm absolutely parched." I watched her as she turned to the sink, filling a glass with water from the tap. Her hands trembled slightly, the faintest sign that she wasn't as calm as she pretended to be. She took a long sip, her eyes locked on mine the entire time. "You left the gala early," she remarked, setting the glass on the counter. "Is everything okay?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of her question. Okay? Nothing about this was okay. Not her lies, not her betrayal, not the charade she continued to play. But I couldn't let her see that. Not yet. I wasn't feeling well. I lied smoothly, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Too much champagne, I guess." Clara nodded, her expression softening with faux concern. "I'm sorry, darling. I should have checked on you. I just got caught up talking to some clients and lost track of time." "Client." Right. Or perhaps just one client. The one who couldn't seem to keep his hands off her all night. I forced a tight smile, my jaw aching from the effort. "It's fine. I know how important these events are for your career." Her shoulders relaxed, and she stepped toward me, her hand reaching out as if to offer comfort. "You're so understanding, Jacob," she murmured. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." I recoiled instinctively, my stomach twisting at the thought of her touch. After everything she had done, the idea of her hands on me was unbearable. Clara froze, her hand dropping to her side as her brows knitted together in a frown. "Jacob, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Did I do something to upset you?" I wanted to unleash the truth, wanted to shout that, yes, she had done something. She had shattered my trust, betrayed our family, and thrown everything we'd built away for a cheap thrill. But I swallowed the words, forcing them down like poison. "No, of course not," I said, the hollowness in my tone betraying me. "I'm just tired. It's been a long day." She studied me carefully, her eyes narrowing as if trying to read my thoughts. I could see her mind racing, trying to gauge how much I knew. After a tense moment, she nodded, her posture slumping slightly in what looked like defeat. "Okay, let's go to bed then. We can talk more in the morning." I followed her upstairs, my feet dragging as dread weighed heavy on me. When we climbed into bed, Clara reached for me, her hand gliding across my chest in what might have been a tender gesture on another night. But now it felt wrong, tainted. I flinched, mumbling something about not feeling well, and turned away from her touch. She sighed audibly, rolling onto her side. "Good night, Jacob," she whispered softly, her voice laced with a sadness that almost sounded genuine. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling as Clara slept soundly beside me. My thoughts were a whirlwind of questions and doubts. How long had this affair been going on? Did anyone else know? And what would happen to Sophie if we divorced? The thought of my daughter in the middle of this mess made my chest ache. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I finally drifted off into a restless sleep, haunted by images of Clara and Ethan entangled in a passionate embrace. When I woke, the bed beside me was empty, and a note rested on Clara's pillow. "Went for a run. Be back soon." I crumpled the note in my hand, my anger reigniting. A run? More like a rendezvous with her lover. I moved quickly, showering and dressing with one purpose in mind. I needed evidence. Solid proof of Clara's infidelity. Without it, confronting her would be pointless, and I wouldn't stand a chance in the divorce. Heading downstairs, my stomach growled, but the thought of breakfast fled the moment I stepped into the kitchen. There, sitting at the breakfast table, was Ethan Blackwood. A smug grin curled his lips, and draped across his lap, wearing nothing but a silk robe, was Clara. "Good morning, Jacob," Ethan drawled, his hand resting casually, possessively, on Clara's bare thigh. "Care to join us for breakfast?" I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Clara looked thoroughly disheveled, her hair mussed and her lips swollen from his kisses. The robe hung open, just enough to reveal far more than I cared to see. "You bastard," I growled, my fists clenching at my sides. "Get your filthy hands off my wife." Ethan threw his head back and laughed, the sound grating against my ears like nails on a chalkboard. "Your wife?" he mocked, his tone dripping with derision. "I'm afraid you're mistaken, Jacob. Clara belongs to me now." To drive his point home, he trailed his fingers along the curve of her neck, making her shiver. Clara didn't pull away or even protest. Instead, she gazed up at him with open adoration, like a teenager infatuated with her first love. White-hot fury surged through me as I stood there, watching this vile display unfold in the sanctuary of my own home. My life, my family, they were trampling all over it without a shred of remorse. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to launch myself at Ethan, to pound his smug face into the floor until he bled. But I held myself in check. My jaw ached from clenching so tightly, but I needed to stay focused. Losing control now would hand them the upper hand. Evidence. I needed proof to protect Sophie and secure my case when the inevitable legal battle came. "Get out," I ground out through gritted teeth, my voice cold and steady. "Both of you. Now." Ethan arched a single brow, his face a perfect mask of mock innocence. "Now, Jacob, is that any way to treat your guests? Clara and I were simply enjoying a cozy breakfast together. This is my house," I bellowed, slamming my fist onto the counter so hard the dishes rattled. "You have no right to be here, especially not with her." I jabbed an accusing finger at Clara, who flinched as though I'd struck her. For the first time since entering the kitchen, a flicker of guilt crossed her beautiful features. "Jacob, please," she began, her voice trembling. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I spat, my fury boiling over. "That you've been sleeping with your boss? That you've turned our marriage into a complete farce." Clara opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over as she stood there, utterly defeated. Ethan, damn him, remained unruffled, lounging in the chair like a king surveying his conquered territory. "There's no need for dramatics, Jacob," he said, his voice maddeningly calm. "Clara and I are in love. Surely you can understand that. You're not a fool." His words hit me like a gut punch, knocking the air from my lungs. In love? This wasn't just a fling. It was something deeper, something that threatened to destroy the life I'd built brick by brick. Just yesterday, my world had felt stable, almost idyllic. Now, it was collapsing into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. "Get out," I repeated, my voice low and trembling with restrained rage. "I want both of you out of my house. Immediately." I turned my gaze to Clara, fixing her with a stare so sharp it could have cut glass. "And don't even think about taking Sophie. She's my daughter too, and I will fight you for her with everything I have." For the first time, Ethan's confident mask slipped. A muscle twitched in his jaw as he glanced at Clara, clearly unprepared for the thought of being separated from her child. "Good. Let the bastard squirm." "You can't do that," Clara cried, her voice rising in desperation. "Sophie is my daughter. You can't take her from me?" "Watch me," I snarled, taking a step closer. "I'm not going to let you two ruin her life with your sordid little affair. Now get the hell out before I call the police." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. The air was thick with hostility, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then, slowly, Ethan rose from his chair, dislodging Clara from his lap. She stumbled to her feet, clutching her robe tightly around her body. "This isn't over," Ethan said, his voice low and laced with menace. "You'll regret this, Jacob. Mark my words." I didn't respond. I didn't even look at him. I simply stood there, fists clenched, watching as he strode out of the room, Clara trailing miserably behind him. Only when the front door slammed shut did I allow myself to exhale, the tension finally leaving my body. My legs felt like rubber as I collapsed into the nearest chair. It was done. I had taken the first step, reclaiming some semblance of control over the chaos. But as I sat there alone in the kitchen that had once been the heart of my happy home, I couldn't help but wonder what this small victory had cost me. Clara was gone, swept away by the intoxicating pull of her lover. And Sophie, my sweet, innocent little girl, how would I explain this nightmare to her? How could I protect her from the fallout of her mother's betrayal? A cold resolve settled over me like a heavy cloak. No matter what it took, I would fight for Sophie's well-being. I would tear my life apart if necessary, burn it to ashes, and rebuild it stronger. Clara and Ethan had declared war, but they had no idea what they were up against. Rising from the chair, I steadied myself and strode purposefully toward the hallway closet. From the depths of the chaos they'd created, I would carve a path forward, and I wouldn't stop until I'd won. From the back of the hallway closet, I pulled out an old, battered metal lockbox, a relic from my days in the military. Flipping open the lid, I stared at its contents with grim determination. Inside was everything I'd need to wage this war. A thick manila envelope packed with documents, a burner phone, and a snub-nosed .38 revolver, its barrel glinting faintly under the dim light. Carrying the box into my home office, I set it down on the desk with a resolute thud. Then I powered up my computer and got to work. Every detail, every scrap of evidence against Clara and Ethan was methodically documented. Phone logs, emails, banking statements. All of it painted a picture of their betrayal in painstaking detail. As the hours passed, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows across my office. By then, I had compiled a thorough dossier of Clara's deceit. I even wrote down a detailed account of that morning. Walking in on them, the shock, the humiliation that still churned in my gut like acid. With each keystroke, I felt the fire of my anger cool, replaced by a chilling sense of purpose. This wasn't just retaliation. It was war, and I intended to win through meticulous planning and cold precision. Leaning back in my chair, I rolled my shoulders and stretched my neck, easing the tension that had built up over the day. There was just one more thing to do before I could rest. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years, one I'd never thought I'd need again. The line rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Yeah, Mick, it's Jacob Caldwell," I said, my tone steady. "I need your help." There was a pause, followed by a low chuckle. Well, the prodigal son returns. "What kind of mess are you in this time, kid?" I couldn't help the grim smile tugging at my lips. Mick's raspy voice and dry humor were a throwback to my days in the Marines. He had been my commanding officer, the man who'd taught me strategy, tactics, and a very particular set of skills. "This isn't military, but it's personal," I said, my voice tight. "How soon can you be in Chicago?" Another pause, this one longer. Finally, he said, "Give me 48 hours. And Jacob, whoever you're going to war with, make sure you're ready to bury them when it's over." 48 hours later, I was sitting in a dimly lit booth in a seedy bar on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with the stench of stale beer and cigarette smoke, and the jukebox in the corner churned out a tinny rendition of an old country song. I tapped my fingers on the scarred wood of the tabletop, my eyes fixed on the door. Mick was late, and with every passing minute, the knot in my stomach tightened a little more. Just as I was about to call it a night, the door swung open, and a familiar figure strode in. Mick hadn't changed much in the years since I'd last seen him. His broad shoulders strained against the leather jacket he always wore, and his salt and pepper hair was still cropped close to his scalp. His sharp eyes swept the room before locking onto me. He made his way over and slid into the booth across from me with a grunt. "You look like hell, kid," he said, signaling the bartender for a drink. I snorted, taking a sip of my whiskey. "Feel like it too. Thanks for coming, Mick. I know this was short notice." He waved a hand dismissively. "Anything for one of my boys. Now what's going on?" "You were pretty vague on the phone." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It's Clara," I said flatly. "She's been having an affair with her boss." I caught them together yesterday morning. Mick's bushy eyebrows shot up. Damn. That's rough, Jacob. I'm sorry. I shook my head, jaw tightening. I don't need sympathy, Mick. I need your help. I want to make them pay for what they've done. The bartender arrived with Mick's drink. He took a long swallow, studying me over the rim of his glass. All right, he said after a moment. What exactly do you have in mind? Leaning forward, I lowered my voice to a near whisper. I want to destroy them, both of them. I want to take everything they hold dear and grind it into dust. Mick set his glass down, his expression unreadable. That's a dangerous road, Jacob. Once you start down it, there's no turning back. I know, I said, my voice firm. But they've left me no choice. They took my wife, my family. I won't let them take Sophie, too. Mick sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. All right, I'll help you, he said finally. But we do this my way. No half-cocked plans, no stupid risks. We plan every move, every angle. Understand? I nodded. Understood. Mick leaned back in his seat, a grim smile playing at his lips. Then let's get to work. And we execute with precision. Mick finished, his tone as sharp as a blade. I nodded, feeling a flood of relief wash over me. With Mick on my side, for the first time in days, I felt like I had a fighting chance. Where do we start? I asked, leaning back in my seat, my fingers tapping against the edge of the table. Mick drained his glass in one swift motion, setting it down with a decisive thunk. First, we need intel, everything you've got. Phone records, emails, bank statements. We need to know their every move, every vulnerability. A grim smile tugged at the corner of my mouth as I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a flash drive, setting it on the table. Way ahead of you. I've been gathering evidence for the past 2 days. Everything is on here. Mick picked up the drive, turning it over in his calloused fingers with an approving nod. Good man. This will give us a solid foundation to work with. He slipped the drive in his pocket and leaned forward, fixing me with a serious look. Now, your daughter. Where is she? With my sister, I replied. I sent Sophie there as soon as I confronted Clara and Ethan. I didn't want her caught in the crossfire. Mick nodded, his expression approving. Smart move. Keep her there for now. The less contact she has with your wife, the better. A pang of guilt rippled through me at the thought of keeping Sophie away from her mother, but I quickly pushed it aside. This was for her protection, even if she couldn't understand that now. And Clara? I asked, my voice rough. What's the plan for her? Mick leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers thoughtfully. She's the linchpin in all of this. If we break her, Ethan will crumble. He's riding high because of her status, her connections. Take that away, and he's got nothing. Break her how? I asked, hesitant but determined to see this through. Mick's smile was cold and calculating, the look of a predator stalking its prey. We'll hit her where it hurts the most, her reputation, her career, her place in the community. We'll turn her into a pariah, a laughingstock. By the time we're finished, she'll be lucky to get a job flipping burgers. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. A flicker of doubt stirred in me. Was this too much? After all, Clara was still the mother of my child, the woman I had once loved. But then, the image of her draped across Ethan's lap surfaced in my mind, her betrayal so casual, so cruel. My resolve hardened. Do it, I said, my voice as cold as steel. Whatever it takes. Mick nodded, his eyes glinting with a predatory light. And Ethan, he asked, what do you want to do about him? The thought of Ethan's smug face and the way he'd taunted me in my own home made my blood boil. Destroy him, I growled. Ruin his career, his reputation, his life. I want him to suffer the way I've suffered. Mick's grin widened into something feral. Consider it done. Over the next several weeks, Mick and I executed our plan with ruthless precision. We started with Clara, digging into every corner of her life, her past, her present, her dirty little secrets. It didn't take long to find the cracks in her polished facade. Unpaid parking tickets, youthful indiscretions, questionable business dealings. All of it became ammunition in our arsenal. At first, we leaked the information in small doses. A whisper here, a rumor there. But the trickle quickly grew into a flood. Anonymous tips found their way to her boss, her clients, and her social circle. The whispers grew louder, evolving into a chorus of pity and disdain. Her boss was the first to act, calling her into his office for a performance review. I watched from a coffee shop across the street as Clara emerged hours later, her face blotchy with tears and a cardboard box of belongings clutched to her chest. Next came her clients, the high-powered executives and socialites who had once clamored for her services. One by one, they dropped her, citing vague creative differences or shifting priorities. Clara's once thriving marketing firm began to crumble, her employees scattering like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The final blow was the one I had been saving. An anonymous tip to the press, complete with lurid details of her affair with Ethan and damning photographs. The story exploded across tabloids and gossip sites, Clara's face plastered everywhere. Overnight, she became a pariah, a walking cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing business with pleasure. Her remaining clients abandoned her, her social circle disintegrated, and her promising career lay in ruins. I watched it all unfold with a grim satisfaction, a sense of justice finally served. Clara had betrayed me, shattered our family for her selfish desires. Now, she was reaping the consequences of her actions. Seeing her broken and humiliated should have been enough. But as the days wore on, a hollow ache remained, reminding me of the life we'd once shared and the daughter caught in the crossfire. Seeing Clara brought so low, so utterly destroyed, left a bitter taste in my mouth. But I shoved those feelings aside, burying them where they couldn't distract me. There was no place for mercy or compassion in this war. Clara had made her choice, and now she would have to live with the consequences. With Clara neutralized, Mick and I turned our attention to Ethan. He was a tougher opponent, his defenses more fortified, but even the strongest fortress has its vulnerabilities. We just needed to find his. We began with his business, a sprawling real estate empire that spanned 3 states. On the surface, it looked untouchable, a gleaming monument to wealth and power. But as we dug deeper, the cracks started to show. Beneath the polished exterior, Ethan's empire was built on corruption and greed. Shady deals, bribes to city officials, flouted regulations. His success was a house of cards waiting to collapse. And we had the proof to make it fall. We leaked the evidence strategically, to authorities, to the press, to anyone willing to listen. At first, Ethan tried to dismiss it as a smear campaign orchestrated by his competitors. But as the investigations mounted and indictments began piling up, even he couldn't escape the tidal wave of public outrage. Investors fled in droves, his properties were seized, and his once mighty empire crumbled into nothing. Ethan, who had once lorded over others with smug confidence, was left with only the clothes on his back and the bitter sting of failure. But for me, that wasn't enough. It couldn't be. Ethan had taken my life, my family, and my dignity. I wanted him to feel the same soul-crushing pain and humiliation he had inflicted on me. With Mick's help, I launched the final phase of my plan, a campaign of whispers and shadows that would obliterate Ethan's reputation. We seeded rumors and innuendos, planting stories that painted Ethan as a predator, a man who preyed on vulnerable women. Tales of harassment, coercion, and abuse surfaced, some true, some fabricated. The truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the damage. His already tarnished reputation from his business scandals became irreparably stained. He was ostracized, shunned by former allies, friends, and even his own family, who recoiled in disgust at the man he had become. In the end, Ethan was left with nothing, no wealth, no power, no allies to turn to. He was a hollow shell of the man who had smugly destroyed everything I held dear. And me? I watched it all unfold with grim satisfaction. I had won. I had stripped Ethan of everything, just as he had stripped everything from me. Justice at last had been served. With a soft sigh, I closed the door to Sophie's room, pausing for a moment to take in the peaceful rise and fall of her breath. This was what I had fought for, her safety, her future, her innocence untouched by the storm that had raged around us. As I walked down the hall to my room, the weight of the past few weeks began to lift. Tomorrow would be a new day, a new beginning. For the first time in a long while, I would face it with my head held high, my heart open, and my soul ready to embrace whatever came next.